Welcome back to Zinespiration, everybody. Today we have a very special guest. You may recognize her from her own YouTube channel where she talks about zines all the time. You might also recognize her from Warglitter Zines #1, or The Silver Guitar, or My First Job, or Winter Solstice, or my favorite, the Carly Rae Jepsen fanzine. We
Okay.
reached out to Allie the other day and begged her to come on this show, and she said, you know what? This is crazy, but here's my number. Call me anyway.
Yep,
Thanks
that
for
was
coming
it.
on, Allie.
Absolutely. That was a direct quote. Thank you for having me, Craig and Ryan. I appreciate you all putting this together. I've been looking
Yeah,
forward.
thank you for coming on. And if you don't remember from any of those zines, you might remember from this one, Guilty, which Ryan doesn't have.
What do I know?
Yeah, thanks.
I've even got these ones. I don't have the other one.
Oh, I'll send you one. Here, I'll send you this one. I'm gonna put
Okay,
it.
Ellie. I want to. I thought we'd start with you telling us a little bit about where did you find out about zines? Where was your introduction to zines?
Um, so I found out about zines when a friend of mine in high school who hung out with like older punk rock kids came up to me after school and asked me if I wanted a copy of her zine. And I had no idea what that word was. But she gave me a copy of it and then just kind of like awkwardly ran away, like kind of how like when you give somebody a present and you don't want to watch them open it because it's like sort of awkward. And I just kind of like it was like your basic cut and paste zine. And when I saw it, I recognized how she had made it and what it was because it looked sort of like how my mom made church bulletins when she was a secretary at a local church. She would like cut out clip art and tape it down and then photocopy it, and that's how they made their church bulletin. And so I was looking at the zine, going like, I know what this is. I know how to make this. But I didn't actually try to make one myself until like 2014. And I think it's just like I didn't have access to a photocopier like growing up. I guess a lot of people like went to Kinko's and spent money to like make copies. But it never occurred to me that that was something that I could do, I guess. So it wasn't until like much later in life that I actually tried it for myself.
Yeah, that's a little bit like me actually. Like I discovered or was introduced to zines like 20 years ago, and then it wasn't until a few years back, maybe 5 or so years back, that I was like, yeah, maybe I could make this
Mm-hmm.
myself as well. Like, but even like 20 years ago, I was helping, and a friend was making, and I was helping him with it, but it didn't feel like something that maybe I should be doing myself or on my own, or like what could I add to the world?
Yeah, and I think like Instagram kind of opened that up for me. Like it probably started with comics, like comic artists who were kind of like doing web comics before Instagram, and then Instagram made it like so much easier to get your stuff out there and get it seen by different people. And all of a sudden, you could just like have all of these scans of your comics in one place together, and you didn't have to like host images and all of that stuff. And so I think through following like kind of underground or web comic artists on Instagram, that's how zines kind of like came back into my consciousness. And I started thinking about like, well, maybe I could make something like that.
That's cool. Like I had a hiatus for zines. For like I did zines from 1998 until 1996 until 2005, 2006. So it's like a really long time. And then I tried doing like the blogging thing, right?
Mm.
And like right when I started Pocket Thoughts, I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna make a zine again because I haven't done one in forever. And then making the first Pocket Thoughts, it just reminded me that like, this is the happiest I've been is doing this and creating this.
Yeah.
And even if no one ever saw the first Pocket Thoughts, I was like, you know what? I just enjoy doing this.
Yep.
And then like Instagram has been such a huge resource for artists and creators, especially in zines. that when I first got on Instagram, I wasn't doing zines anymore. I was doing a blog, and the correlation between the two just really opened up a world of other great creators that I can meet.
Yeah.
Well, what part of the zine making do you enjoy, Allie?
I don't know. Like, I remember one time my mom saying, when you were a little kid, you appreciated any opportunity to cut pieces of paper into tiny itty bitty little bits and then ground them into the carpet so that the vacuum couldn't get them up. And I think that, like, it's just it's something about the physicality of being able to have something that's like a book, but also shape it like a three-dimensional object instead of like flat pages printed out. I like the feel of it as like a book or a booklet or a pamphlet. And I like cutting and pasting. I like having glue on my fingers. I'm trying to learn InDesign, and it's slow going. There's like a steep learning curve for that.
It's a
Yeah, but I really wanted to try it because one of the things that I wanted to put in Warglitter too just was not going to work as like a hand lettered kind of thing, and it really kind of needed to be printed out and not really collaged. And I even made like a collaged version of it and never posted it anywhere or put it in the store or anything because it just did not turn out the way that I wanted it to. And I wasn't ready to learn any kind of software until just recently because I was like overwhelmed at work and everything. I couldn't possibly take on another thing. And then quarantining happened and I was like, there's literally never been a better time to teach yourself something new. So that's something that I've kind of been struggling through, but I think I'm going to be really proud of like the initial issue that comes out that's like fully InDesign. That's an interesting challenge.
Well, I do about 70, I'd say 75% of my work for zines is done through Photoshop. So if you end up like needing anything,
Okay. Excellent. Yeah, I'm really excited about your the new one that you have that you've modeled after 17 magazine. It's like that was my demographic, right? And like right when I got into comic books was also right when I needed to like get the little teen girl magazines to learn how to do makeup and shit. And my dad was in the grocery store with me, and he was like, "You have to choose. You can either get the most recent X-Men or you can get Young and Modern magazine." And I chose the magazine. So like I'm really excited to see the zine that you've made. That's like kind of a subversive version of
I
that.
borrowed a bunch of like Cosmo and 17 and Women's Health from a neighbor of mine to like get a feel for it. And I brought her a copy of the zine the other day to be like, thank you for, letting me have it. And she messaged me to say how much she enjoyed it. And I was like, do you get a sense that I'm mocking it, or did I do a good job of emulating it? Because I can't draw the line between the two, and I think that that's where I realized that I've done something well.
Yeah. Yeah, so you didn't need to use your Hanson fan magazines to get the right style from it?
Well, those are all in bags protected from, dust and don't mess with the Hanson magazines. I never even took the posters out.
Oh.
What made you want to do online zine reviews on YouTube? Like, because you don't see a whole lot of it, and like this show is fairly new and hoping to grow. But like, what made you want to do that?
Well, I decided to do it because, like you say, I went to YouTube and I did some searches and I couldn't find anything like what I was looking for. I wanted some kind of zine community to exist on YouTube. I think I'd already been watching WriterTube videos. There's so like people who write books, like novelists and stuff. They have like a whole community where they like kind of do vlogs about their day, or they do like different challenges. Like one of the people that I watched was doing videos where she tried to write like somebody's not their style, but like the way that they suggested writing. So like Stephen King's way of like always sitting at the same desk, or Neil Gaiman, he like writes everything out by hand and then goes back in and types it up. And so she would try different authors' like work styles and see how they worked out. And so I was looking for something similar for the zine community, and really couldn't find anything like what I was looking for. I found some people who were doing photography zines, and they had very slick videos where they didn't really talk. And I found a lot of like people who would make a one pager and then like scrapbook over it, but they weren't like making copies of it and distributing it or trading it or anything like that. And so I just kind of thought, I mean, if nobody else, you know, like if there isn't a community for it, then what can I do to start talking about something that I really enjoy and maybe get other people interested in it? So to me, like doing reviews seemed like the easiest thing. Also, I was making a zine library for my students, and I kind of needed zines for that. And I was like, I want every kind of zine, like anything that's you know, school appropriate, I guess. And so doing reviews also kind of became a way to like go back and forth with somebody and get something that I could use for my library for my students. So sort of just made sense at the time, I guess.
Yeah, I've seen some of those videos you talked about, the AuthorTube stuff, and then even like BookTube has a massive presence on YouTube as well. But yeah, there was like I sort of did the same as you. I searched YouTube and I thought, oh, I'll find hundreds of zines and things like that.
Yeah.
There was like nothing. There's and like you say, there was a few really high quality stuff about photos, like photography zines, and or like some one page sort of clip art, sort of computer stuff or something. And yeah, I was a bit disappointed about it too.
Billy, I am Billy. He had a channel, but it was like at the time everything on it was at least 7 years old, and I was like, God, I wish he was still making something, because like that was exactly what I was looking for. And so I went through all that content, and then that was it. So I was like, well, what can I kind of start doing?
Well, and I found that when I YouTube zine videos, it was very like promotion, like everyone's talking about their own zine, which is nice. I mean, like you've got to do your legwork to get yourself out there. But what I found from, you know, finding you and seeing, for instance, Rich's videos as well at Farrell, it's really about broadening the community, right? And talking about other people's work and, you know, giving a voice for everybody. And that's why I even started doing it too, is like, you know, I've got this zine, you know, I've got this zine, I love this zine, I want to tell everybody about it so that they can get it too. And that's, you know, the reason for this that we're doing now.
It was like the only time I think that I've ever found something that wasn't like already at the height of popularity or in the decline. You know what I mean? Where it was like, there's actually like a space for me here. So I'm just going to go ahead and take up some space, you know?
Yeah. Do you have like a like this show is called Zinespiration. Do you have like a zine inspiration at all? Did you find somebody when you were searching at the beginning, or somebody that like a bit of a, I don't know, or a zine that you like to pick up at different times?
Yeah, you know, so I was talking about kind of like underground or web comics on Instagram, and yes, this King of Nothing by Mike King or Mike Sweater or Mike, whatever Mike's going by now. He is a comic book artist, and he just kind of inspired me because he was a normal, regular guy who just sort of like started making comics because that's what he wanted to do, and he just kept doing it and got better and better at it. And so I think the reason that I sat down and made my first zine, which was a comic zine, was because of Mike, because the way that he kind of treated everybody like they were just as good made me feel like there wasn't really any barrier other than whether or not I was willing to sit down and work on it.
I like that attitude that you have, because I remember the one time, a little over a year ago, I'd messaged you and I'd asked, about a third party zine store. I was like, I'd gotten zines from someone and I really liked the zines and I loved the content, but it was so full of spelling mistakes. And I was like, do you think that I reach out to them and say, hey, I love this, I just want to let you know. And you were like, don't do it. Just let them do their thing. Let them create the way that they create. That's them. You do you. And it was just some of the best advice that I've ever been given.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think that that answer, and so I had an answer like ready for you immediately because I had encountered the same thing and I'd already thought it through. And I think that part of it is just like having a background in education. Like you don't know what other people's access is, and like there are people who make zines, like write them in English, but English is not their first language, and they always apologize, like, I'm so sorry if my English isn't good enough. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Because I can't speak anything else. Like, the fact that you're trying makes you better than me automatically, and so it could be somebody who is really trying to express something but having difficulty with our sentence structure. Like, you don't know what the situation is. And what's cool about zines is that it doesn't have to make it through the editing process. Like, you can have an idea or be passionate about something and just have like a moment of being able to make it and just sit down and do it and print it out and give it to somebody the same day.
Is there anything that you don't see in the zine community that you'd like to see, Allie?
I think so. Like, I'm starting to get more and more into like kind of like occult witchcrafty zines, because that's something that I'm personally into. But when I started getting zines, I was like kind of avoiding that because I knew that I wanted to take them to the school and that people would flip the fuck out if I took that to the school. So like, so like, now I kind of am rethinking like how I choose zines and which ones I want. So now I'm kind of specifically looking for more of that content. I think something that I'd really like to see happen in the future is us kind of change how we think about e-zines. I prefer a physical copy, and I think for me personally, it kind of comes from some snobby ideas about what being published looks like. And I think that like having that fixed mindset on it being a booklet isn't really helping because e-zines that are just scanned to kind of be like a book digitally are really kind of not doing what we could be doing with the digital medium, I think. Like, I think we're kind of stuck on this idea of like paper books. And I love them, and they're never going to go away. But I think that there's some other stuff that we could be doing, like, I don't know, like with coding or web pages, like thinking back on these like GeoCities crappy HTML websites that I used to have and stuff like that. Like, why aren't we doing something more like that?
I was thinking about this the other day too, and the idea that if you look back on website technology, and if a zine were a website, you're absolutely right. It would be an Angel Fire or a GeoCities website.
Yeah.
If someone would come up with an e-zine that was interactive and utilized like Flash or something, and I thought of the example of Homestar Runner and Strong Back. Right? I knew you'd get the reference. And just how there was all these hidden things in the videos that they had. If there was zines like that, I
Yeah.
think they would take off. I think they'd be huge.
Yeah, I'm thinking
But
the
it's not
exact
going to
same
be us
thing.
and Fuck to do it. It's going to be the people that we teach about zines
Yeah.
in a couple of years that are going to be like, oh wait, we know how to do this better than that.
Right. And I think that, right now what we're doing is, either we're making a physical copy and then scanning it so that people can access it digitally, or making it on software so that it looks like a book. But like, what if there's, a poem and then you scroll down and then there's like a Flash cartoon and then, there's like a Mad Libs thing that you can do. And, it's more dynamic than just like a digital version of a printed book.
And the interactiveness of it, if in an online sense, I think it would translate. It would be so much fun, is what it
Yeah.
would be.
Yeah.
And when you think of, like the heavy hitting zines with deep meaning and, issues to solve and get out there, electronically is going to be the way to do it. And if you can make it engaging and interactive as well, then the person reading it's going to get more from it.
Yeah. And especially just like, so I had this idea, like maybe the second day of quarantine, and I was super excited about it. I finally like sat down with all my zines and organized them, because I had them in like 3 or 4 different places. I had like the box that I took to the school because it was all the school appropriate zines, and then I had like a pile that was not appropriate on a shelf, and then I had like a pile of envelopes where like I opened it and I slid the zine out and I was like, cool, and put it right back in and just put it in a pile because I could not deal with it at that point. And it became like this tall shame pile of like, I don't even know what this stuff is. And then I got to the bottom of the shame pile and there was stuff from like last June that I hadn't even opened. And I was like, what the hell am I doing? And so I ended up, by the time I had gotten everything all in one place, with 2 boxes worth of zines. And I really I have all these zines that I really enjoyed reading, but I don't need to keep. Like, for example, I have a zine from Fish Spit on Rockabilly, which like, okay, so it's a really, really good zine, but I'm not into Rockabilly, and so I don't have anything like any opinion. You know what I mean? Like, I was happy to learn from it, but I also have no authoritative take on it at all. And I just feel like it would be better off in the hands of somebody who could like also be really passionate about that. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to start a new thing where it's going to be called Free to a Good Home. And I'm going to put it on Instagram, and I'm just going to do a short video where I'm like, here's a zine. It's awesome. Tell me why you should have it. And like, try to find the real home for like this zine, like the person who actually really needs it. And I was like, that would be so cool, because then like, what if that person and the person who made it got together and collaborated, and it just like helped build the community. And I was so psyched about it, and I was totally gonna do it. And then the next day I woke up and I was like, mail is not the thing right now. Like, I cannot be sending a bunch of mail out into the world with everything that's going on. So it's like, I had this great idea, but now I have to sit on it kind of feeling. But yeah, we're just going to have to kind of embrace digital life and, virtual fests and things like that for a little while. And I think maybe this is a really good time to start figuring out like what can zines look like in a digital or virtual world and still be like really interesting and dynamic and feel personal.
I totally get it. Because if it's just a scanned zine as like a PDF, and I've done them, and you give it to someone and they go, yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's like the 10 minutes I spend on Tinder every morning. No, 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 no. And but if it's something that you can like touch and feel and interact with, then the user's gonna get more out of it.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that like part of what I really enjoy about it is trying to figure out how they made it, and that does not come through with an e-zine version.
Yeah.
At least not for me.
That's something that like Craig and I like to talk with the guests about. It's like the process of creating, and because not only do we learn something new that like we can use, because I'm always trying to do different styles and different things with my scenes, but it just gives a really good mindset into how people create and work.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything specific you want to share that you do that might be like a good learning experience for us and anyone watching? Because your teams are all very different too.
Yeah.
Like you don't follow like a series. If you go from say Carly Rae to Winter Solstice to My First Job, these are all very very different needs. So like the same thing wasn't going through your mind with this one as well as going with this one.
Right. Yeah. So like the smaller ones, like especially My First Job, I basically made that for my students because I was like, well, they're starting their first jobs. They might find it interesting to read about me working in a movie theater in 1999 so that I could save up and buy a beeper. Like I don't know. So it was kind of like that was part of it. So I guess like considering your audience is probably important. The reason that like Warglitter 1 is so different from that is because my audience was not my students. I was thinking through a lot of things about like my personal ancestry, and then what I was reading up about like superstitions and different practices that made their way to our area in southern Appalachia from like Western Europe and stuff. And so it was more about like kind of trying to figure out what I thought about all of those things converging. And they started out as like newsletters that I sent out for a little while through Tiny Letter. I just had like a couple really long sort of like newsletters that I sent out. And so I stole from that a little bit. That's why it's like all different dates and everything. And I just kind of like compiled it together into one thing. So it kind of really depends on who it's for, I guess. The silver guitar, I wrote that for Jens Lekman in a creative writing class that I took. Baby, Won't You Come My Way? I don't think you have this. Do you have this one?
No, I don't.
Nope.
So Baby, Won't You Come My Way is about, so it was one of those things where like I started writing about one thing and then it ended up being about something else. So I started out writing about Fetty Wap and when that song was popular in like 2015. And it made me think of my friend in 2015 who like later killed himself in 2017. So it just kind of like goes all over the place by the end of it. And then I did just like some doodles while I was watching TV one day and put that on the inside and then just made a little zine. So
maybe I do have that one.
I don't have that one.
I'll send them to you. I'll send them to you. Yeah.